Hey everybody, I'm the DnD Doge, and I read cringe Dungeons & Dragons horror stories so you don't have to. Dungeon Masters and Game Masters are the keystone to any great tabletop RPG. They run the world that the players explore, and use a lot of their free time to make NPCs, monsters, and events for all of us to enjoy. Though sometimes, just like with players, there can be DMs that leave a lot to be desired, or just be downright awful. Much like the examples in these next 4 stories. But first, I present a video of cats, the lords of all the interwebs, to help boost those likes and comments. Now, with our wholesome levels up, let's take them right back down. Sometimes, the horror doesn't end even after you quit. By Reddit user Katana and Fugue. Almost a year ago, I finally worked up the courage to leave multiple campaigns run by a friend named Rose. We had met through a 5e based Discord server around 3 or 4 years ago. During our time together, we probably played in at least a dozen games, most of which ended prematurely. She decided to run her own homebrew game, which turned into multiple campaigns, along with a collection of players we'd met over the years. Despite just being online D&D friends, I'd have considered ourselves a fairly tight-knit group. We'd play other online games together. We supported each other's art or streams or small businesses. Some players even had met in real life. And for the couple of years we played together under Rose, things weren't perfect, but they were nice, and people enjoyed themselves. She was a new DM, still trying to find her footing, and she constantly asked for feedback, what she could do to improve, etc. Over the years, we had multiple conversations about her DMPCs, concerns with some of the homebrew, the frequency of random encounters, how constant PC death made it difficult for a party to form rapport. For example, once, as level 3 characters, we just had to retreat from a horrible bandit ambush, rolled as a random encounter. We'd probably been fighting close to 20 bandits, randomly determined, and lost multiple player characters. Our group barely got away, and once we were sure we were safe, we decided to take a rest. Rose had us roll for another random encounter and surprised us with another 20 or so bandits, who ended up murdering another PC and taking all of our money. As a group, we talked with her about how punishing these encounters felt, especially since we had no way of influencing our outcome positively or negatively. More often than not, it felt like an excuse to surround us with monsters. She said she'd consider our concerns. We hugged it out, but surprisingly, things never changed. It took years for me to realize things had actually gotten worse, and that Rose's focus had shifted from telling an epic story to pushing players to their limits. She wanted to run a dark and gritty, incredibly deadly campaign that kept the players feeling powerless at least 70% of the time. She spent hours bragging about her homebrew creations, their special abilities that countered specific players, how she had buffed creatures because we were getting too strong, and she didn't want us getting cocky. Deadly and dark is a valid way to play, but it wasn't how I wanted to play. I stuck around because we were friends. I supported her, and I was worried that telling Rose I didn't enjoy her games would destroy our friend group dynamic. In the end, I worked up the nerve. I was in 3 weekly games she ran. I gave her a heads up and let her know that at the end of the arcs in each, I would be leaving in order to give her time to write off my characters. I let her know I supported how she ran her games, and didn't want to force her to change her style just because it wasn't fun for me. She panicked. She said she'd change, and that my leaving would screw up her plotlines massively. But I had made my decision, and given my tabletop equivalent of a 2 weeks notice. That seemed more than fair. She eventually calmed down, or so I thought, and said that everything would be fine. That's when the real horror began. She started to harass me in other games we were in together as players. She'd abandoned my characters mid-combat, refused to heal me, stopped talking to me even if my character asked hers a direct question. Sometimes, she'd talk over me as if I wasn't there. She started to tell other players that I was a big old crybaby who wanted to play nursery school D&D, and that I was just better off finding a new hobby. In her own games, she'd focus down on my characters during encounters, to the point where other players had to become my bodyguards. When other friends started to come forward and express their concerns with the balance in her encounters, she spread rumors that I was sleeping with them, or trying to turn them against her. Needless to say, I didn't wait until the end of the arcs in her games. I just left, and several people ended up leaving with me. We stopped talking, but she continued to force rifts in our friend group, demanding that people choose sides. Most didn't, but some did. After a few months, things returned to a semblance of normal, with a looming aura of general hatred and distrust. As I mentioned at the beginning of the post, it's been about a year since our falling out. We haven't talked, in or out of character, because yes, we do play some games together still, but our DM keeps a close eye out to make sure that any drama stays away from the table. Some folks who still play in her games have told me that over the past year, she's done some nasty things to my PCs. She's enslaved them, murdered their families, turned them into monsters. In one case, apparently my lawful good bard, who was raising funds for his orphanage, has become the BBEG and is constantly trying to molest and or murder the current party. At the end of the day, it's just a game, and I know it's all fiction, but still, feels like I abandoned my characters to suffer at the hands of a monster. OP in this story did the right thing. He wasn't having fun with Rose's games anymore, and after trying to give some constructive criticism to no avail, decided to try and quit the games on good terms. Unfortunately, Rose decided to be vindictive and childish about it, to the point of targeting OP in the remaining games he was in of hers, and even being a bitch to him in games where they were fellow players. I imagine those games must now feel really awkward, not only for OP, but for the other players as well. Hopefully, things will improve on that front. Though with that said, let's move on to the next story. DM throws a temper tantrum every time. By Reddit user Zombie Bones. I am a forever DM who has finally joined a game that I am excited for, Curse of Strahd. I have purposely avoided this module as a DM because I've wanted to play it. I'm big on horror and wanted to experience this adventure as a player. I found a, quote, professional DM running a pay-to-play game. He gave me an interview about my expectations and experience, etc. He seemed pretty cool, and I was down for heavy horror RP. We are 3 sessions in, having completed the optional Death House lead-in adventure. Okay, I took a peek at some of the Curse of Strahd stuff, but the story as a whole is largely unfamiliar to me. And this DM has had outbursts every game. First thing you should know is the game has 7 players total. For me, personally, that's a nightmare made even worse that it's all online. 3 players are brand new to D&D and tabletop RPGs in general. They have no concept of the rules or have any idea how to use the software we play with. 3 other players are vets who know the DM personally. Then there's me, the forever DM who just wants to play for once. Session 1, DM, who took a full hour to do a pretty decent overview of the adventure, the virtual tabletop, and digital character sheet, goes on a 20-minute tantrum in the middle of the game against the new players for interrupting to ask questions about the virtual tabletop. Okay, fair, but maybe take it easy on them. They're new. Session 2. DM stops the game to complain, again, about the new players, and drops the entire party into a pit trap, saying, quote, "You'll learn to investigate your surroundings next time." Session 3. Again, the newer folks are confused about level up and how to do it. DM says, quote, "Okay guys, you know what? Forget it. If you don't know how to roll HP, then we're going to change how we do it." He also killed off a character of a new player because he didn't like how he was playing. I'm afraid my Curse of Strahd experience is going to be an arduous one, but I'll be damned if I pass up this chance. TLDR, paid DM doesn't seem to have the patience to run Curse of Strahd for 7 players, 3 of which are new, and has had angry outbursts about it every session so far. Update. I talked to the DM, and they acknowledged the points I noted here, and their impatience with the newer members, and thanked me for feedback. So far, 2 people have quit the campaign. I'm still a little trepidatious moving forward, as I don't see things changing, but like I said, I'm hesitant to just leave. Now, I can understand someone getting a little frustrated with new players here and there, but you gotta realize, for someone new coming into tabletop RPGs, all the rules and how to play the game can be a little overwhelming at first. And throwing a fit every time a new player has a question is just childish, especially when you're getting paid to run the game for them. This DM apparently doesn't know the concept of customer retention, which is proven by the fact that 2 of the players already left the game. Thankfully though, OP spoke to him about this, and hopefully, the game will get better, and our forever DM OP will be able to enjoy being a player yet again. On to the next story. And a quick warning, this next story contains elements of sexual assault. So if you would like to skip the story, go to this timecode. Though, with that warning out of the way, let's get into it. DM takes punishment way too far. Submitted to the DnD Doge subreddit by Reddit user StarBlazerM31. Many years ago, I was in a mini Star Wars campaign with 2 other friends. For reference, the DM was male, and me and my friend are female. She and I were 2 rabid Star Wars fangirls, and didn't hide this fact. We wrote fics, drew fan art, the whole 9 yards. Well, the DM, who was also my friend's boyfriend at the time, was a narcissistic a-hole who actually hated giving the spotlight to any other character in his campaigns, except for his. His DMPCs were the stuff of nightmarish legend. We started this game because we had all come up with new characters, and wanted to show them off, / experiment with them, and their respective storylines and abilities. My character was the Padawan of a canon character who I really loved. I was actually very grateful that the DM gave that to me. Then, when my friend's character came in, the DM pulled the whole Phantom Menace thing. "You can only have 1 Padawan." "Nah, I think I'll have 2. That thing. Cue me being a little pouty, but trying to be a good friend and player, so I went along with it. The DM was taking his sweet time in introducing his new character, who he'd been working on in private. We knew we were going to meet him soon, we just didn't know when. Until it happened. One night, during a campaign, the DM looked at us and said, "You want a taste of the dark side? Taste it." Note, we had not mentioned anything about wanting to go dark side. He did this all on his own. He then proceeded to have our characters captured by an unknown group of individuals, taken to a planet somewhere, chained to walls surrounded by Ysalamiri. These were force-negating lizards, for those who don't know, and had our characters repeatedly raped for what he said was months. Yes, he went into graphic detail too. No, we weren't given the opportunity to fight back. We were railroaded. We had to sit there and listen to what was happening to our characters, and when we tried to fight back, he just said that it didn't succeed, and resulted in even more humiliation. The character who was our master never came to help, and then, after all of that, he revealed his brand new shiny Sith Lord. We didn't play again after that, and I told him what a piece of shit he was for pulling that stunt. He claimed that my friend had been getting on his nerves about it, and wanted to teach her a lesson. I asked him what that had to do with the game, and why did he feel the need to do that to my character too. Plus, what the fuck, dude? Rape? With no defense? How is that going to make stirring RP that keeps us engaged? How does that not alienate us and make us at least never want to see his face again? It turns out that the DM was also a master manipulator and emotional abuser, but that's not a story for here. Jesus Christ, what a despicable asshole. Using that subject matter to get back at your girlfriend because she was annoying is total bullshit. Then to also bring OP into that too. It's no wonder that they eventually found out that this guy was a massive piece of shit. And of course they didn't play again after that. And I hope OP's friend kicked that guy to the curb. But with that said, let's move on. DM shoots down all character ideas but his own. By Anonymous. Hey y'all, I just had the most bizarre experience and need to get it off my chest. So here's my first, and hopefully last, RPG horror story. I'm looking to join a long-term campaign, so I'm scrolling looking for game, looking for something interesting. A post catches my eye about a homebrew campaign. It looks great. Clear rules, detailed info, and a rundown of other players and their backstories. I apply with the usual info about me, my experience, style, etc. I hear back from the DM relatively quickly. We seem to agree that I'd be a good fit, and begin discussing character concepts. I throw 2 pretty flexible character options out there, and he turns them down for pretty valid reasons. Fair enough. He asked that I think of a motivation for my character that involves them trying to escape a specific city so they can meet the party. This wasn't in the original Looking for Game post, but that's easy enough to incorporate. He adds that he heard a really interesting idea from another candidate who turned out to have bad vibes, and asks if I'd be interested in playing it. I find it a little odd that he'd take a specific character idea from another potential player, but I get inspiration for characters from the internet all the time, so maybe I'm just being harsh. The idea is for an advanced and unique piece of tech who gains sentience and is on the run from evil corporation who wants to enslave them. Pretty cool. Not the sort of thing I'd usually go for, but I'm open to adapting it a bit. I comment that I don't really feel comfortable playing a recently awakened machine, as I really don't want to RP someone learning things like social norms, nor am I super invested in the potential themes surrounding a machine gaining sentience and learning independence, emotion, etc. I think this is a pretty reasonable boundary, and propose some alterations. Maybe I could be the inventor of the tech who doesn't want to see their creation enslaved. Perhaps I could be an evil corporation employee who wants out from the organization, so steals the piece of tech to sabotage them, and is now on the run. He shoots these down, so I propose several other smaller changes. Things as small as changing the tech's race from Autognome to Warforged. He proceeds to shoot down every single one. He literally says at one point that my character couldn't have invented an advanced piece of tech despite their entire background being a scholar and researcher, because they're only level 5. At this point, I'm a little frustrated, but try not to let it show, and instead send a few more original character concepts not related to the awakened tech idea. Some more detailed ideas, but some as generic as wizard with student dead on the run from creditors, to anti-war activists trying to escape from law enforcement. And of course, he shoots them all down, saying, quote, "I have no idea how to tie any of this stuff into the narrative." He then asks, quote, "What sort of flavor are you thinking for the piece of tech you'll be made from?" I'm baffled, as at this point, I thought I made it pretty clear that I didn't want to play Awakened Tech. I send back, quote, "As I mentioned, I'm not sure how comfortable I am with playing an awakened drone or robot. It's a cool idea, but it's not the sort of theme I'm super interested in or comfortable exploring. But I'm sure there are multiple ways we could adapt this character concept to be about another race or idea without changing too much for you narratively." And then I was blocked. Anyway, clearly when he said in his post, quote, "I like to collaborate with players and build together a unique character that fits the world and setting. What he really meant was, quote, "I'm going to insist you play this highly specific character I feel like writing into the story, and if you express any concerns, I'll ignore them." TLDR, DM shoots down all of my character ideas and insists on me playing his concept, which I'm not comfortable with. He shoots down all of my suggestions or requests for modifications, and then blocks me. Now, I can understand if a DM wants to introduce a specific character concept into their world, but if that's what he wanted to do, he should have just said as much in the looking for game post. Instead, he wasted OP's time by OP making all sorts of character concepts, which I thought sounded pretty cool, just to constantly shoot them down and try to get OP to just play DM's concept. And when OP finally states clearly that he doesn't want to play said character, the DM just blocks him? Why waste yours and his time? Just say what you want. Well, anyway, hopefully OP finally found a game that was willing to take one of his characters, and that DM finally found his awakened robot. Do you have a story of bad DMs that you would like to be shared on the channel? If so, feel free to post it in the comments, on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and remember to take a moment to thank the great DMs that you have in your lives. Until next time.